So today we get to move on to a new theme. So we're in June, and June we celebrate the power of imagination, which, what do you think the color might be? Hard to figure out, right? Light blue. So it's light blue, and it's really about being able to imagine, create, use that divine spark within, outpicture, right? The disciple that's associated with this is Bartholomew. So that is what we're moving into today, and that's actually what I'm choosing as my theme. Sometimes I do the theme for the month that we do the power, and sometimes I don't, but this month I will. So by one particular source that many of us use, that great spiritual source known as Wikipedia, we have a definition that I want to share with you as a starting ground. It's the ability of forming mental images, sensations, and concepts in a moment when they are not perceived through sight, hearing, or other senses. The imagination is the realm of the mind where you see things that don't exist yet in the world, but which one day might. Imagination is about creativity and expression of our creative core. It's what we're bringing forth from our creative core. It's the ability to allow for those divine sparks to step out, to step forward, to step from within you, to lift you, to feed you, to nourish you. That creative spark. But one thing I believe is that the idea of imagination is underappreciated for the most part as a critical element of creativity and innovation. Because we think of as imagination as child's play. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. But how can we use our imagination, even when we were talking about this living room conversation and having hard conversations in our community, in our world, and being able to heal ourselves? How do we imagine, even though we're so stuck in what we think is and will always be, or what we've known, how do we use our imagination collectively, individually, to be able to manifest, birth a new tomorrow? And that calls on us to be brave and especially to listen. So today we're going to be talking about imagination and innovation. How do you use your imagination to manifest, and more than that, to innovate? In New Thought, particularly the Fillmores and sort of the old school folks in Unity when it first started, would talk about imagination as the scissors of the mind. So think about those of us who've done vision boards, right? Or we cut out something. You know, you're cutting those things out as what you kind of want to outpicture. Oh, I want to buy this, or I want to go to this retreat, or I want to do this. Maybe you put it up somewhere and you see it. It's the same thing in a sense. It's the scissors of the mind, the imagination, that we're using these mental images to be able to frame our lives. Holly Sharp, who is the editor of Science of Mind magazine, she says that imagination, we become the humble architects of the divine's intention. So we're taking those creative sparks and we're creating something. We're not letting them go, we're not losing them, we're not casting them off as weird or out of nowhere or just incidental. We're using them. So as we move forward this month, we're going to be able to use our imagination to create a self that is more aligned with spirit. And more than that, I want to suggest to us that we need to reclaim that part of ourselves. Many of us have lost that part of ourselves to imagine. And we need to create that connection again, that understanding, that excitement about what it is to imagine so that we can be able to ignite that faculty within ourselves. Who are the greatest people on the planet with imagination? Kids, yes. I know we want to say artists and all of that, and yes, that is all true. But kids, we have a school here that it takes place Tuesday to Thursday. And it is such a gift to be able to watch them. Now, for those of us who grew up in traditional mainstream schooling, we would probably be aghast when we watch them. Because first of all, they're outside most of the time playing. And those of us would say, when are they going to be reading and writing, right? How are they outside playing all the time? When does the schooling really take place? But the philosophy is very different at this school, and many schools, thankfully, that are transforming our educational system in the country, using play and imagination as a way to ignite the intellect as well as the spirit. And so I often will see them, and you can traipse around the campus here and see all kinds of interesting contraptions. They make teepees and all sorts of interesting things with rocks, and they're constantly playing and expressing and thinking and building and moving and talking and sharing, engaging with nature, engaging with each other. It is absolutely a mystical experience to watch them. But they understand, we did this as children, right? How many of you have had children and like Christmas Day, this is my daughter, Christmas Day, you've got all these cool things and they end up playing with what? The box or the paper. And you're like, but I just went and I fought off 1 million people at the toy store, to be able to get this nice shiny thing that is limited edition. And they're like, cool, but I'm playing with the box, right? Because there's something within them that understands, I don't need all of this fanciness. I want to be engaged. I'm engaging me. I'm engaging that within me. I don't need all this stuff outside me. What I need is right here. And so part of it is for us to understand that we all have that ability. And we as a society generally have made it something that imagination is child's play. It's something that you let go. That was then. Now move on to the real stuff. We're in the logical mind. We're irrational. We're rational people. We're thinking beings, all of that, right? But the idea is to start again, just like Jesus said, as childlike, with the child mind, with the child expression, to be able to understand and feel and be in the connection with the Spirit. Some of us have had that creativity criticized by our families of origin, maybe by our teachers. Maybe we even have had that imagination beat out of us. But today, as we move forward this month, we're going to play with this idea to be able to reclaim that for ourselves. When I was in preschool, I was 3 years old in preschool, and I remember painting. It was a time in the morning, we were all painting, and we had spent some time just, with our little easel. And I remember being there and painting and being so excited, and then the teacher said that it was time for lunch. And so I decided that I really didn't want to eat. I didn't really need to eat. I wanted to be able to continue painting. And so she kept redirecting me to come sit down, and I kept telling her that I just wanted to paint. And when I looked over and saw what the kids were eating, they were eating pimento loaf. Y'all know what pimento loaf is? It's like that bologna type looking thing with the olives and I don't know what in it. Come on. I mean, that was definitely not motivation for me to leave my art project. To make a long story short, I got into a situation with the teacher where I had to sit down, but I refused to eat. And she made me sit there the rest of the day and said I could not get up until I ate my sandwich. So I sat there the rest of the day as the children continued to play and do other things. And the bell rang, and she said, "You will stay there. You cannot go." And I saw all of my classmates leaving, and my brother was actually a year older than me, and he was in preschool there with me as well. And she would not let me get up. And so my brother leaves, my grandmother's outside waiting to pick us up, and of course he informs her about what's happening. And of course Spitfire Grandma comes in and raises holy ruckus in there and grabs me by the hand and of course gets into it with the teacher and says, "It's time to go." And then it was interesting because she pursued to almost she pursued to sort of critique me and criticize me for crying, and said to me that I needed to sort of, kid up, It was sort of that, one of those first instances at 3 years old where she sort of said, this is gonna happen, get over it. You can't be in this. And if you can't do it, just move on, And I remember that so like it was yesterday, because I didn't realize actually until maybe about 5 years ago how that changed and clouded my ability to access my imagination and creativity. Every time when I was in class, as I got older and art would come on, art time would come, and they would say, okay, we're transitioning to art time, I would get so nervous and so anxious and start to sweat, and I never understood why. When I had to take art in high school, things like that, I would always freeze up. And then I understood that was a transformational moment for me that made a cloud on this idea of imagination and creativity. It was something that I then had to transform. But all of us have maybe something like that at some level or another, somewhere in our lives, where someone has taken that joy of imagination away from us or ridiculed it. Maybe you've had this $1 million idea. I was talking to my brother yesterday, and I was telling him I Instacarted something. Oh, I'm obsessed with Instacart. Any other fans? But I was telling him about it, and he said, I had that idea for Instacart and DoorDash like 15, 20 years ago. Anybody sort of in that where you've had this idea that you see now out picturing in the world? It's no coincidence. If we believe in the idea of divine mind, all of these things are floating around for us to be able to ride that wave and be able to manifest into the world. Everything in terms of innovation or creativity or things that we have as a society are not just sort of out of nowhere. They come from divine mind. They're always there. They're just waiting for expression. Any advance that we've had in medicine and in science has always been there. Gravity has been there. We just discovered it, as many other things. So these ideas is, when we look at what imagination means, it ultimately means trusting our inner guidance, trusting that intuition, trusting that divine spark that's saying, this is good. This is God. This is something for you. This is something that can change your life. This is something that you might need. This is something someone else might need. The imagination, what might happen if each of us here trusted that creative imagination and that divine spark? If each and every one of us did that. I'm going to give you an example of one divine spark that was listened to, that has really changed our world in many ways. Has anyone ever seen the musical Hamilton? Has anyone gone and seen the musical Hamilton and been completely transformed? Completely felt like there was something there for you? If you haven't seen it, you should. I had the blessing to see Hamilton, which is a Broadway production by Lin-Manuel Miranda in Puerto Rico when he came after the hurricane to be able to raise funds. He had retired from playing the main character, and he came back to raise funds for Puerto Rico during the hurricane efforts. And I had never listened to the soundtrack. I wasn't one of those people that was already anticipating and knew all the words to the soundtrack and had watched it a million times, through different bootleg versions or what have you. I didn't know. I wanted to come fresh to it. And seeing it and seeing him there really was an amazing experience. And immediately I knew that this had been a divine download. Now let's think about this. Lin-Manuel Miranda was on Broadway. He had off-Broadway, really. He had done productions off-Broadway. He had been a theater kid his whole life. He had been around the theater. But the way he tells the story is one day he had this time where he was imagining things. He was sort of just in that space, that creative space, and he had this spark that came to him immediately about doing a Broadway play that was all with rap. Can you imagine that? Like, let's think about that. At the time, nothing like that had ever been done. And all of a sudden, he's saying, I'm going to do a thing on rap. And not only is it going to be on rap, there'll be all people of color, by the way. And all of these things that he thought, can you imagine him going to a traditional establishment in Broadway and sort of saying, guess what? I'm doing a huge Broadway production and it's going to be rap. It doesn't sound crazy right now because we've heard about it for years. But at the time, it was innovative. It was using imagination to move and propel forward creativity, that he then trusted his judgment and enlisted others to be able to do that. And at the last time I checked, it was probably it was the most successful Broadway production of all time that has been all over the world. I say this to say it's one just example, but all of us can think of examples out there in the world, or even think of examples in our own life. And here's what I'm going to share with you in terms of practical Christianity, just a few quick tips. One of the most important thing, if not the most important thing, that we need to do to cultivate this faculty of imagination is just to be still. Most of us have a really hard time doing that, right? We're constantly thinking, we're constantly doing, we're constantly acting, we're going here, we're going there, we're reading, we're in classes, we're doing all of these things, but to be able to truly be in that alignment and feel that alignment and know that alignment, it takes moments of silence. It takes that moment where we're sort of letting go, and it doesn't mean that we're fully unaware of anything. It just means that we're allowing for that moment of rest of the mind so that divine mind can take control and have its way with us. Being still is part of this process, and that could mean 5 minutes a day. That could mean anything. Start wherever, but take the time. I guarantee you will see huge difference in your life. And with that, the second thing is being ready to receive. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to be here, but you have to set the intention to say, I trust that something is happening here. I may not feel it in the moment that I'm here. I may not know what's really happening, but God is always working. Like gravity is always working. Like our breath is always working. It's working here. I'm not sure, but I'm becoming a co-creator here. I'm giving myself over to this creative power. I'm giving myself over to this creative expression, and I'm setting the intention that something mighty is coming through and happening. And the next thing is about being open. Because if you set that intention and something comes through that's like weird, right? Something comes through that makes no sense to you. Something comes through that is so wacky, illogical, irrational, you think would never happen, like a rap on Broadway. But you have to listen. You have to be willing to entertain what is coming through, to trust that something is coming through that is important for you, for the world, that it is not an accident. There are no accidents in divine expression. Everything has a purpose. And lastly, you must become then a co-creator. You've been still. You've set the intention. You've gotten the message or messages. Now what? You must act. And that could take many different forms. Calling a friend, sharing it, doing something, writing something, taking first steps about something. But it means acting. You're becoming a co-creator. It's not energy, information that's out there. What are you going to do with it? That becomes something where we become the initiators of that divine expression in the world. I'm going to invite us right now that I've shared some practical applications, if I can invite you to come up and help me a little bit here with some music. I just want us to take a moment in meditation where we're going to allow ourselves to maybe imagine. And I'm going to share with you all a prayer which I'd like to use as a meditation about creativity and innovation. So I'm going to invite you all to just take a moment. Close your outer eye. Take some beautiful deep cleansing breaths and open up that inner eye, allowing yourself to be still. Practicing these steps, be still. Breathing in the calm of the moment, breathing in this relaxation, allowing the mind to rest, allowing whatever has happened this morning or this week in your house, in your heart, in the world, just allowing it to take a rest. And setting the intention to be deeply in communion with Spirit. Knowing that Spirit is moving and living and breathing right here and right now in you as you. Divine Mind steps forward. Divine Mind has its way this morning. Divine Mind nurtures and grows as we simply allow breath to bring us present. And from this present place, we easily turn our attention to that place that resides deep in our being, that place that is ever present, the eternal home. And from this place, we recognize that one life, that one love, that one universal body, that one Spirit that moves. There is no place and no thought and no feeling that can be outside of God. So there is no thought, no feeling, no circumstance that can separate you from the God of your understanding. I know and claim that I am an expression of a creative, perfect idea born in the mind of God. I know and claim that I am an expression of a creative, perfect idea born in the mind of God. I release this prayer into the universal law, knowing that it is so. Allow that to just rest for a moment in your spirit and soul in the silence. It is with a grateful and open heart that we give thanks for this opportunity to remember the truth. We are grateful for the way life works, for this imagination that we carry within us, knowing that we are true innovators of life. And so it is. You may open your eyes and take a deep breath and come back here to this time and place. As I move to close, I just want to share a quote about imagination by Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, and it comes from his book, The 12 Powers. And he says this: "The spirit of truth projects into the chamber of imagery pictures that, rightly understood, will be a sure guide for all people who believe in the omnipresence of mind. Everybody dreams, but the great majority do not attempt to interpret the handwriting on the wall of the mind, or they take their dreams literally, and because the dreams don't come true, they consider them foolish. Through ignorance of the law with which imagination works, man has made imagination just a byword. We look upon imaginary things as trivial, yet we know that through the imagination we can produce wonderful changes in the body. Studying this law, we find that the character of both soul and body is determined by the imagination and its associated faculties. Paul, the Apostle Paul, referred to this power of the imagination when he wrote in Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, "But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are transformed into the same image from glory to glory, even as from the Lord the Spirit. So today we're invited, if there's something you want to change in your life, if there's some connection you really want to make with the Spirit, we have to be able to listen and learn to be the creative force. Charles Fillmore said that when we allowed for imagination, we would then have the soul be ready to make that great change, which he called regeneration. Regenerating our lives, regenerating our thoughts, regenerating the world, regenerating what we think we know. Many of us are caught in this loop, right? The Groundhog Day, this constant loop of patterns, whether they're addictions to people or to substances or to religion or to whatever. How do we break that? How do we become the scissors of the mind to get new patterns? We listen, we play, we dance, we dream, we intuit, we engage that imagination. We break through the material and what we think we know. We break through like the new dawn of a new day. We break through the imagination for your breakthrough innovation. Daring to imagine, create, daring to upgrade your life. So I leave you with the question, what magical, awe-inspiring, wondrous thing is waiting to innovate your life and to help you innovate the world if you just believe and say yes? Saying yes, daring to say yes, breaking through for innovation. And so it is.